coach came to me with 6 online clients. At the time, they're working around 40 hours per week on the gym floor, only a collective combined income of around £3,500 per month. It covered the bills, but it didn't produce enough to have an enjoyable lifestyle. They wanted to increase their income, they wanted to go online, but every time they tried to mention it to one-to-ones, no one seemed interested. They posted consistently online, they're very consistent with their content strategy, however, there was nowhere near enough of the volume of inquiries they needed to grow and scale. And they didn't think there was enough interest out there to leave the safety of one-to-one income and risk it for the highly volatile market, which is online coaching. Well, now we have 107 online clients. The income has risen to between £18,000 a month and £20,000 a month, and they work 0 hours per week on the gym floor. And I've looked back over the last 2.5 years we've been working together, and I've summarized the 5 things that I think made the biggest difference. And I put them in order because at each stage throughout the process that we encountered a bit of a bottleneck, and going back and looking back with hindsight, these are the biggest things that added the most value to this coach. So if you are posting consistently, but you're not getting the inquiries that you think your consistency effort is warrants, then chances are one of these 5 things is going to make a significant difference to your business. But if you want to know for certain what will make the biggest difference for your circumstance right now, I put a free advice form in the description below. If you fill that out, give me some details of where you want to go in terms of goal, whether it's client number or income, tell me what your current circumstance is and give me some clarity on that. I will tell you specifically what you need to focus on first. But with that being said, we're going to go straight into it, because when this coach came to me, they weren't sure what to post. They were looking at what other people were posting. They're trying to model what works, which makes sense. But the problem with that is it's not coherent. And what you need to do is you need to be consistent on a set of problems. So A, you continually attract these people into your following and they start to kind of watch you. B, you let the algorithm know what you're about and it's just obvious. And C, when people do follow you, the intensity of repeating that problem and keeping them interested or keeping them hot, so to speak, is there. Otherwise, it's like trying to boil a kettle. If you just take it off the heat, put on the heat, take it off the heat, take it on, turn it off, take it on, turn it off. It needs to be consistent in hitting those points over and over and over again to push people over the action threshold of wanting to inquire to find out more. So the biggest thing I helped in the first stage was giving him clarity on who he helped, because that enabled him to find out what to talk about in his content. That enabled him to find out what he needed to say, how he needed to say it, and how he needed to deliver it to a point where he not just got followers, but he got people to actually inquire. And this is a massive thing, because I see a huge problem with people's content in general, because it doesn't lead anywhere. You don't have consistency where you reference a select 1, maximum 3 problems, so you're not gathering the right people into your audience in the first place, and then you're not drawing them to a key solution. And that's ultimately what this is, because I look at it like, well, the industry in general is like a solar system. On the outskirts, you've got people who know the square root of bugger all, and on the inside, where the sun is, you've got people who know everything. And you have different investment levels. So from the outside in, you get more experience, and you get more investment, and you get people who need different information, have different problems. So you need to be aware of where is your orbit range, where do you meet people, and where do you take them to? And once you have clarity on that, your content becomes very simple, because it's like, well, some of your content needs to reference the problems at the first orbit range, and then you need to show what it looks like at the final orbit range, because that's what you're about. You take people from here to here. That's your remit, because there's no point trying to attract people who've never stepped inside of a gym before and showing them what it looks like stepping on stage, because that's not what they want. It's not relevant to them. So this really helped the client get crystal clear on what they needed to talk about and how they need to do it. And then this really did actually start to accelerate those initial inquiries, because just making it obvious and being clear and upfront on the content, on the profile, on the pin posts, on the highlights, on the stories, we then looked attractive to the right people. So that helped us get out the gate. And I think we probably got to 20 clients from the 6th just using this alone. But it did kind of overlap with this, because once they had clarity on that, they then had the answers, but then we needed to systemize it, because life's busy. He was trying to manage the one-to-ones as well as the online. So we created a coherent content strategy, which, again, I say strategy, which I mean, it's having different elements into the content. So this is where we added in elements of not just talking about the problems, but we reference the process and we reference the proof as well. So it's three different angles. And again, I think inquiries seem random sometimes because they just come and go, and sometimes you just think it's tied to the season. But you can engineer someone wanting to inquire, and a lot of people don't really realise this. A lot of coaches just think it's random, or they think it's a certain trend, or they think it's one data point. Right? They think they just post one thing, that's it. Not necessarily. That's probably the last straw on the camel's back that broke it. But it's adding up, and I can't remember who says, but it's literally like if you're trying to build a wall, it's just one brick at a time. One brick at a time. You're not just getting a giant brick and going, boom, done. No, it's laying out the pieces and people consuming and getting drip fed over time, and then maybe one will be the last final bit. But when you build a content strategy where you have three different angles, you're talking about the problems, you're referencing those so people resonate at the beginning of the first orbit range, and then you show what you do. Show what it's like, court your audience, show them the inside. And again, the golden nugget here is if your process looks different and it's mapped to the problems and it kind of is the answer to every single problem that you reference, then it looks like a perfect fit. And if you're talking about stuff and you're selling stuff people want, it makes your job easy. So this is why I lean heavily on the marketing and less on the sales effort, because frankly, as coaches, we want to help people. We might not have the time to specialise in sales calls where we're just having, well, and plus we don't have an abundance of 12 calls a day where you're going to have to work on objection handling. It's the wrong approach for me. It's just like, you're not trying to be a closer. You're not trying to become a seasoned sales professional. What you're trying to do is you're trying to use marketing and content to pre-sell. And once people come to you conditioned to pre-sold with referrals, which we'll talk about, then it's just a simple case of answering questions and giving them clarity and letting them get out their own way. So this all comes down to showing elements of the process, and lastly, proof it works. And again, this is not just before and after photos. I drilled this into the client over and over again of just showing the context, explain the stories. When you talk about the client and you talk about what happened, describe this journey from orbit range here to orbit range there. Explain it, make sure that people watching feel heard and understood, because if you map the behaviour, thoughts, behaviours and emotions of the people at the beginning of the orbit range, and you talk about that in the before and after, and they have the visual proof of the before and after, and they're hearing exactly what they feel, then all of a sudden their confidence in you goes sky high. So this really started to kind of make the inquiry rate consistent, because right now on a bad week we get 4 inquiries, maybe 3. On a good week we can get 13, 15, depending on if it is like coming up to summer or not. In winter it can be more towards the 3 or 4, but the point being is once you have a bit of a system in place and you're being consistent of it, people will start to kind of gravitate and move up based on just consuming content with these different angles. And it's like a Catherine wheel. You rotate around these, so it's not just the same type of content, the same angle. You're just alternating a little bit. So that kind of systemized the knowledge we put into this into like an output into mainly content. And then the biggest thing we got to was, well, we had to then look at retention, because we were around 40 clients for quite a while. I think it took about, we were there for at least 8 months. And, mainly when I'm working on one-to-one clients, I'm normally focusing on the process. I think if you look after the process, the results take care of themselves. And I'm quite patient with that. Like, I don't believe in trying to get to an urgent deadline yesterday. There's so much desperation in this industry, and there's so much false pretense and expectation of getting to 10K within 3 months. It's ridiculous. If you double your income over 2 years, that's still doubling your income, way more than any other job salary increase that you could get. But sometimes things take time to develop. And if you typically focus on the outcomes and just chase that, you sabotage yourself, come across as sleazy or salesy, and it takes longer, ironically. Whereas if we focus on process and improving what we do, and just really improving what we do in terms of content and service, you'll find you'll get there quicker, ironically. And this has always been my approach. So we were head down busy on perfecting this strategy and looking at the onboarding, that we realized that, well, we were getting consistent inquiries, but the client number wasn't increasing. So I started to kind of notice this on after like the first sort of like 3-6 months of like analysing this strategy. And then it was very clear that people were dropping off around 12 weeks. And to be fair, we looked at the model, and he did used to focus heavily on 90 days. It was in the bio, and then there was a lot of 12-week packages. That was the minimum commitment period. And there were like incentives to sign up for 12 weeks. I personally despise that because I think it sends the wrong message. It takes 18 months to create long-term psychological change in the brain, like neuroplasticity, and it's just things do take time, and you set yourself up for failure because if you do want to get to 10K, like everyone does, you have two options. If you work with people for around 12 weeks as your average client lifetime, you have to work with 287 people if you charge a modest 150. If you can keep people longer, say 6-8 months, you have to work with 87, charging the same amount. One means you have to onboard 24 people every single month. The other one means you have to work and try and attract at least 1 to 2 inquiries every single week. Which one's more feasible? The latter. So this was only discovered by analysing the back end of service and looking at the data and the churn. And we used to average £470 per client based on a 2.8 average client lifetime. And then we changed the communication in the content. We changed some of the service frameworks. We looked at kind of creating frameworks, projections, horizons, looking at how we describe the service. And it took about 4 months for the audience to be receptive to this, to consume the message, to take it on board, to consider. But within 4 months' time of the changes we made to this, people would come to us and they'd say, I want the 6-month package because, frankly, I don't want to go through this again. I don't want to go through and rebound. I know I need to boost my metabolism and like get out of this diet. I know I need to exit properly. So people did come to us with the right expectation, and they still do. So this is where we looked at money being earned, not just on the sale. And a lot of coaches just obsessed with how many clients have they got on this month, this roster. It creates this toxic relationship where you're always living in lack and you're not focusing on who you have. Whereas you don't make money on one sale, you make money on the whole lifetime. So the client value increased well over 1,000 once we kind of optimized the journey and we started to kind of prioritize that. We did focus heavily on communication skill. I did teach him a lot about communication, psychology, influence, negotiations, all the psychology around improving adherence and helping people, which massively helped, along with some of the systems and the frameworks. But the ridiculous part of this was we earned just over £100,000 within a year just by extending the lifetime across the client base. Technically, that's 100 grand in the bank without gaining an extra client. That was earned in additional to the income gained with clients by just extending, going from a 2.8 average client lifetime to a 6.7 average client lifetime. When you do multiply that, it would cost 78 clients at the time. So that was a big awareness for myself. Hence, it's changed my communication of like how I look at building a business now, because it was such an eye-opener. But it's vitally important. The content has to attract the right people. Then you have to create that horizon and projection, the framework, to encourage them, incentivize them to stay. And then once you've got that, you build better relationships, which leads us on to point 4, which is all about referrals. And everyone's obsessed with just posting, getting strangers from Texas or from all these other places of the world, and for some reason they don't like attracting local inquiries. However, you can become a local celebrity and a market of one in your area very effectively, and this is what we did. We didn't actually use any paid ads, and we haven't sent a single outbound DM in 3 years. So this is all inbound. I never advise people. People hate spamming people in DMs, and I hate it too. So what we did instead was, okay, how can we leverage proximity? How can we get in front of our clients' audiences? Because this coach is still under 4,000 followers. That's an incredible amount of money to be making with, in theory, a low volume of exposure. And it proves my point, which I've said all along, is it's not all about views. It's about impact. It's about intent. It's about understanding the psychology of who you help. But you'll realize that, well, their audience was 4,000, but the combined audience of all his clients, all his contacts, was more like 28. So it was positioning, collaborating, story tags, challenges, internal challenges, competitions, networking. All of this helped us get in front of the local market or the market where there is always preconceived trust, because it's better than paid ads. You go in front of people who kind of know you. And learning this, I discovered there's two main psychological principles which makes this more effective for getting inquiries. Is because when this person sees a result in this person, the pain of comparison is higher because they know the person, they feel overtaken. But they also believe they can get the result because they know the person. So on the one hand, pain goes up, which increases urgency and drives change. And on the other hand, believability goes up as well, which is a big bottleneck. Will it work for me? So it was a really powerful marketing strategy, which has obviously been honed and refined over the time we've been working together. But this really accelerated people coming through, and it helped us, again, get inquiries without having to hire a setter, without having to message people, without having to be anything proactive. Everything has been inbound throughout the entire process. This is all inquiries coming to us. We just have to position things correctly. And the best part about this is it's real. And like, you see so many people do these fake, I've got X spaces this month, I'm looking for this many people. Fake scarcity is it's always been cringy. And it's just not true. And I've never advised it, because it's just, people know it's bollocks. They know it's wrong. And you know, you could have someone about to inquire with you, and then you could put up this fake scarcity, and it could be enough to create distrust and make them doubt, make them not realise. So I really try and avoid any sort of strategies like that, because it is a short-term win for long-term pain. It's the opposite of delayed gratification. You're trading long-term trust and compounding for short-term gain, which is never a good strategy. And then hence why you get a lot of coaches who've used these strategies and then they burn out, and they're constantly seeking other strategies. They need to get a setter. They need to look at ads. They need to grow their following. They need to go outside. They need to go outside. They need to go outside. They need more, because they burnt the people inside. Well, and then it's just, well, change the approach and just stick to it. It might take a little bit longer in the short term, but in the long term it's quicker, because things compound and you maintain the trust. It takes years to build up solid reputation and days to ruin it, unfortunately. So it's just being authentic with your messaging and with the strategies you pick. And now we're in a position where we're having to manage it. So this is where I'm building an app for the client, and it's going to kind of combine WhatsApp, their training app, the nutrition elements, and it's going to reduce the bandwidth required on them, because serving 100+ people on your own, it's quite a lot when you're still providing an insane level of service, a check-in every single day. That would be impressive, but unnecessary. But it's a check-in every week. There's multiple touch points throughout the week. But the app is going to find out who's messaged most recently, who hasn't. It's going to collate and put everything in front of the coach. So it's like a bit of a CRM where they're going to go, cool, these people, we sent an automated message out to these people because you haven't heard from them. They missed the last 2 check-ins. Voice note them today. So I'm building out a little bit of automation here to help with the management, not to help with contacts, because I think there's some elements where you can use AI and you can use systems to streamline the service, but when it's client facing and it's client engagement and communication, don't. Keep that. People are paying you money. They're paying for your living. Do the decency to provide human contact, because that's what people need. The more AI people use, the more they're going to crave certainty through trusting a human. I genuinely believe that, because the amount of information is through the roof. People will be saturated with it, which will lead to overthinking, under-actioning, analysis paralysis. And what they actually need is confidence in what they do by giving authority, or you giving authority in the command or the action point. That will get them to kind of acting, get the momentum up. Plus, we all need that sense of community, because working from home, working on your own, and less human engagement with more AI coming in, people talking to AI more than talking to other humans. Yeah, we need it. So providing that, and the best part about this is what I haven't put on here is this client is now meeting up with his clients regularly. Spas, they're actually putting on a photo shoot in Marbella. The top 3 transformations on his service, they're going to go for free. He's putting them up. He's sorting out anyone who wants to join. They sort their own flights out. He's going to help get them over there. The photo shoot's accessible for everyone. met up with a client in Italy. The client was as a German client, moved or on holiday to Italy, climbing Mount Vesuvius, said, do you want to do it? Looked up flights, thought, yeah, let's do it. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of the week, he's in Italy for 2 days climbing, and then he's back. And then he's doing walks, he's doing coffee meetups, he's doing workshops with his clients. Because he's no longer tied for time in terms of on the gym floor, he's now putting on these events for free, so anyone in his service can go and get involved, and it's really taking off. That one-to-one element, he can bring that back, but everyone's on the monthly retainer. He doesn't have to chase any payments. Income's increasing, and then this year we're up 11% on last year for the time of filming. This is May. So things are moving up, and they will continue to move up, and this, I know, is going to help us manage a capacity of 200 clients with one coach. And that's still providing a really good service. So we're going to have to probably put a waiting list for onboarding at some point, because that gets a bit heavy. But I think that's the main things that made the biggest difference. Because I know you've probably seen loads of different strategies from loads of different business coaches and mentors. Some will create distrust, and some will burn your audience. And this is just an honest reflection of what we've done to get to this figure, this monthly recurring revenue. And initially, it might take a little bit of time, but it ultimately is shorter in the long term, because you're building trust and you're optimizing for people to come to you rather than practically chasing people away. And I think there's real power in that. Yet you'll probably be convinced by other people that you need to use ads, you need to use outreach, you need to use 5 people posts or scarcity tactics where it doesn't feel authentic. And I just want to let you know, you don't have to do that. So if you are posting consistently and you're not getting the inquiries that you want, chances are one of these 5 things will help be a big difference for you. And if you don't know for certain, like I said, the free advice form is in my bio. You can fill that out. I'll come back with clarity and details on what specifically you need to focus on. But if you have 15 clients already and it doesn't look like one of these, or you want to know a little bit more of what your journey to a figure like that would look like, I've actually got an inquiry form in there as well. Because if you put details on that, I'll come back to you, I'll look at your circumstance, and I'll explain the exact stages, and they might be different to these. It all depends on your circumstance and what you're trying to achieve. And with that, I will give you an honest expectation of the results and a rough timeline. I don't tie everything to timelines because it's irrelevant. In time, yes, things will compound, but if you focus on process and let the thing do its work, you'll ironically get there quicker. But I will be as honest as I can with the results that you could expect given your circumstance and the goal, and I'll explain the stages that I would take if I was in your position.